Hi, my name is Pip. This is my debut novel, The Hunted. It is the first book in the Phoenix series, and today I'm going to talk to you about how much does it cost to edit a book. Before we get going, there are lots of different editors out there and they charge and quote differently. So just make sure you know what you're getting in for, make sure you know what the fine print is. Sometimes you will see editors give quotes based on a per page guesstimate. So that is actually not done based on your Word programs Times New Roman size 12 font page. That is done on a 250 word page. So that is very different. You could very easily mess up the calculations and get a bill that is very different to what you thought you were going to be getting if you don't understand the fine print on that one. Some editors have packages and they will very clearly state on their website what is included in that package. They don't always state how many words that includes. So make sure when you approach an editor for a quote that you say, look, my book is around 52,000 words, 78,000 words, 112,000 words, whatever it is, and make sure that you get an accurate quote based on that. Now, editing isn't cheap, but it is well worth it. There are ways that you can make it cheaper. So what I would suggest is if you're on a budget, you try and edit it as much as you physically can yourself. And the best way to do this is to often write it, read through it, make some changes, and then step away from it for a little while so that you can come back to it with a clearer mindset. You can also ask friends and family to read through it and flag any issues, but this still ideally should not replace an actual editor. If you can find beta readers or writing groups, this can also help, but how much this can help you edit on your own varies. That being said, the world is a competitive place and people expect a self-published book to be just as well edited and just as well formatted and just as beautiful as a published book, except that the self-publisher does it all. So just keep in mind that you probably need an editor if you really want something to happen with your book, if you really want people to enjoy your book and not be commenting in the reviews about how the typos or the edit or lack thereof affected their reading experience. You might not need every type of editor that there is. Try and be objective to work out which type of editor you would best be served by, and then spend your money based on that. For example, I have dyslexia, and one of the ways that actually presents in me is that when I'm writing, I write very stream of consciousness style. I don't put in commas where they should be. The sentences are very long. So if I want someone to buy my book and read it and understand it, I need an editor. For me, there's also an element of I have spent ages working on this. And if I'm gonna spend that long working on something, I wanna make sure it's as good as possible. So that's why I spent money on an editor. Obviously, everybody's financial situation is very different, and so you can make the judgment yourself based on what you think you need. But I would say try and be objective. So I know what my strengths are as a writer, and I know what my weaknesses are. I know how the dyslexia affects me. And so I pick my type of editor based on what I think I'll need. Developmental editors I've seen come in at anywhere between 1 cent and 10 cents per word, which is a big difference. It's a kind of edit where they look at the way your plot flows, they look at the general story, they look for any pacing issues or thematical issues. It's not a grammatical check. In a developmental edit, they can raise issues or questions that your reader might have, and this can be really important. They might also give you a bit of an idea of how much work they still think needs to be done either on the manuscript or on the editing side of things. Line editors I've seen generally cost about 1 to 4 cents per word, and they're looking more at the flow of each sentence and the structure of each sentence. They're looking for character consistencies and how natural the conversations are. They're looking for how well you construct your sentences, whether there are certain words that you use all the time. They're looking at assessing each line and looking at your word choices, and sometimes they'll actually flag areas where you have used the same word a whole bunch of times and it's kind of getting a little bit repetitive, and they can give you some alternatives that you can use instead. This is not a big picture story. They're also not a copy editor, so they're not going to be looking for every single typo or every single grammatical error. If you have a nice line editor, they might flag any glaring issues with you, but this is not a developmental edit, and this kind of editing takes quite a bit of time, so make sure you also have a discussion about what sort of time frame you're expecting to receive your edited manuscript back in. Copy editors again go for around 1 to 4 cents per word, and people do tend to clump copy and line edits together, but they're not really the same thing. So a copy edit is a very focused look at the way the book is actually written, and it's a hardcore spell check and grammatical check. A proofreader usually goes for 1.5 cents to 3 cents per word, and you usually don't bring a proofreader in until you've done all other editing that needs to be done. This is a final spell check and typo check and grammatical check, and they also check things like making sure that what is italicized should be italicized and everything is capitalized where it should be. There are also sensitivity readers, and I guess technically this is not a kind of editor, but I think it's a kind of editor because they might flag some areas where you are not being as sensitive as you could be. You need to do your research. Check that the person who is offering you the service actually has credentials and actually should call themselves an editor and is charging what is reasonably fair. Often what you can ask for is a test sample edit. So you would send them like 1 page of your work and they will edit it for you, and that will give you an idea about how legit they are or not. But you absolutely need to check for credentials. You don't want to hire someone who thinks they're an editor because they enjoy reading. That's not an editor. Get a quote up front. For example, when I got my quote, I was asked to send 3 sample chapters so he could get an idea for how much work was going to be involved and whether it was really ready for him to take on that role or if I needed to take it away and do some more editing at that point. You need to communicate with your editor. You need to specify that you want to be told before they continue on with the job if for some reason it's going to incur an extra fee, because as they went on, the amount of editing required was much more significant because, say, for example, the end half of your book wasn't as well edited as the first half before you sent it to them. You want to have discussions on timelines, so roughly when they think the job is going to be completed. Expectations are important for both parties, so make sure you have a conversation. Make sure you know exactly what you're getting in exchange for your money, and make sure that you book ahead. Great editors will often have a backlog of work that they're working through, so you might need to book 2 to 3 months, 4 or 5 months in advance, particularly if you're aiming to get your book out by a certain date. But what I would say is that it's most important to communicate clearly of what you want and what you need so that you don't fuck anybody about and waste anybody's time. That is a quick way to get a much bigger bill than you thought you were going to get. But make sure you do your research. Make sure you know how flexible your editor is. If you've booked a time slot, say you were supposed to deliver your manuscript to them on the 15th of July. If you don't deliver to them on the 15th of July, that's it. You lost your spot and they will move on to the next piece of work and you have to get back in that queue and rebook another date. Others are a little bit more flexible, so make sure you find out what you're getting yourself into, make sure you know exactly what they're expecting, make sure they know exactly what you're expecting, and that way you should minimize your issues. My debut novel, The Hunted, is now available everywhere. You can find it on the Book Depository, Amazon, Kindle, Apple Books. Don't forget to check it out. Let me know in the comments below if this video was helpful for you or if you'd like to see any other particular topics, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button.